Rifters, it's been a while, hasn't it? Well, I promised you an epic episode 150, and this is going to be pretty epic. It's going to be a pretty sweet episode. So we have two interviews today on the show. We're going to have Marc Guggenheim on the show. If you don't know who he is, shame on you. But he is one of the top writers at Marvel Comics. He is also one of the men behind the Arrowverse. He was the showrunner for Arrow and for Legends of Tomorrow. So we're going to have a lot of cool things to ask him. We're going to pick his brain on producing, writing, comics, TV, movies, all that stuff. So he's a pretty big guest to have on the show, and we're honored to have him. Our second interview is going to be a pre-recorded one. I got to sit down with one of my childhood heroes, well, the voices of one of my childhood heroes, Larry Kenney, who is the voice of Lion-O from the Thundercats. So that will be our second interview after Mark, finishes up with us. So we have two great interviews for you today. We also have myself, Jason, as always, Dimitri in the booth, but we also have the return of the Movie King himself, Sam Cooper. Sam, how are you?
Hey, everybody.
I'm glad to have you back, Sam. I've missed you.
Yeah, I miss you too, baby.
So if you guys just started getting into the show, Sam was one of the founding members of Static Rift. He was there from, I'd say, episode 1 to maybe in the 60s, and then he moved to New York, so it was kind of harder for him to do the show, but I love having Sam on the show, and he does return. He still returns every now and then to talk movies with us, so he's always a host in my heart.
Aw, thanks,
so
man.
it's going to be a pretty sweet show. We're also going to have Dan back on. Dan's also one of the founding members of Static Rift.
Woo.
He'll be back on after the interviews. And yeah, we're going to talk movies. We're going to talk video games. We're going to talk everything that you've known to love from listening to Static Rift. If you've been here from episode 1 or you came at episode 149, I appreciate you listening to the show, and I hope you really enjoy this. It's going to be kind of a nostalgia show, too. We're going to talk about some past memories, later on in the show and stuff like that. So it's going to be a lot of fun for sure, and I hope you guys really enjoy it. But it's definitely a big episode for us, and I'm excited for it. We took a little hiatus, partly to plan for 150 and have it be epic, but partly because I thought I was going to have a heart surgery. I'm actually having it tomorrow. So I'm a little nervous about that, but that's going to happen tomorrow. So we'll take a little bit more time after this episode, probably be back in the end of October, and we'll have a lot of really cool stuff in store for you then. But as we start every episode, let's get into what have we consumed. Who wants to start?
Why don't you go ahead, John?
So
I'm going to make you start.
You're going to make me start,
yeah.
which is unheard of. Usually I'm always the last person. But I honestly didn't do a ton. I had to move. So I moved from my house in Walpole to Foxborough, Massachusetts. If you're not from Massachusetts, you know that that's the home of the Patriots. So I live kind of near the stadium, kind of not near the stadium. And it was a lot of work. I don't remember moving being so hard when I was a kid. And it was a lot of work now as an adult. I still don't have a lot of stuff moved or finished and stuff, so it kind of stinks. So that's kind of what I've been doing a lot beside planning for the show and emailing and messaging people to come on the show and stuff like that. But one of the things I always do on the show every October is I always go to haunted houses, and I like to review them on the show. I'm technically not supposed to go to haunted houses, according to my doctors, but I still went to one last weekend. I went to Witch's Woods, which is usually one of my favorite haunted attractions in the Massachusetts area. It's in Neshoba Valley. It's a ski resort, but they make it into this really spooky, awesome place where there's 5 attractions. It was opening weekend. It was also buy one, get one free. And unfortunately, it was not a great experience.
Oh, no.
Usually it's my favorite one. If not my favorite, it's one of my favorite ones every year. They're really good. They're one of the few that has a hayride. So there was, like I said, 5 attractions. The first attraction we went to, it was pretty good. It wasn't bad. It was like a doctor's type thing. You walk through this house, and it's like a doctor's lair, if you want to call it that, and he's killing people, and he's, saying, "Oh, I'm gonna open you up and stuff," and I was just cracking jokes because I'm like, "Hey, my surgery's not here yet. I
Yeah,
gotta
right.
wait a couple days."
As long as they're not my doctor, I don't care.
But it was pretty good. They got me and my friend a couple times. You know, I kind of go on if they can jump, startle me or scare me. The aesthetics of like the props and how they look and their makeup and stuff. So their makeup was top notch as always. The props were awesome. But so after that first doctor's, kind of house, it was not as good. We were only a group of 3. Usually we have a couple more people with us, but it was only me, my friend Mike, and my friend Dave, and we didn't have anyone else with us. So we were a smaller group. So after that first house, they kind of put us with bigger groups, which sucks for a haunted house if you've ever been to one. You don't want to have like a conga line going through the house.
No.
Because the jump scares aren't going to work. The animatronic scares usually are setting back up by the time you walk by them if the group's big enough. So you got to kind of hope to be in the front of the group or in the middle of the group. If you're in the back of the group, you're kind of screwed. Unless you have somebody following you, which can be kind of annoying and not really as scary as they think it is.
Right.
So the second house was a medieval house, and you were at a dinner with an undead king. It was not great because of a big line that they put us into. We thought we would get in first. We were in front, but they made us like go into the house, and a woman was explaining, like giving you a story before you go through the house, kind of probably to let the next group go ahead a little bit. But she positioned us to make us in the back at that point.
She screwed you.
Yeah, she screwed me pretty hard. And what made it worse is I'm usually like, so I don't get scared, or I try not to get scared. I'll try to be a comedian to try to push the scareness down. And we had another comedian in the group, so that never works.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Battling comedians, that's never a good thing.
So the second house was pretty bad. I think it would have been good if we weren't in a big group, but it was pretty bad. The next house we went to was it was actually the hayride, and the hayride is usually the best around. This year was awful.
Oh.
Our tour guide, we always have a tour guide on the hayride who explains the story to you. She just fumbled her words and like missed her cues. She was not good. I've never noticed her before, so she looked like she was a new tour guide. Generally, we got the same guy every year. It was an older man. He'd wear like a executioner's robe, and he was the best. We didn't get him this year. He was on another one of the hayrides. We got this new, noob, it seemed.
Yeah.
It also seemed that since it was opening weekend, that a lot of the parts of the hayride wasn't finished. So there was like tractor trailer trucks in just random parts.
Oh,
and
that
it just,
sucks.
Yeah, it didn't seem like it was finished, and it was really short. Then there was a vampire walk. It started out bad because we were in a big group, but then we were like, screw it. Yeah.
We're gonna need clarification.
You
on what
walk.
the hell a
It's
vampire
called
walk
like
is.
it's called like the vampire something, but you're basically walking through the woods, and it's like the vampire's domain. And so it maybe like the first couple of minutes of it kind of sucked because we were in a bigger group, so the vampires were popping out, and we were kind of just like, oh, this sucks. So we just legitimately just stopped and crossed our arms.
Huh.
And then finally, like after the group was away enough, we started walking, and it got pretty good. So I'd give this house like a half, kind of good, kind of bad.
Yeah.
But if we weren't in a big group, it would have been amazing.
Ah.
The aesthetics outside, what they put, the sounds, there was breathing, there was air blowing on you. Vampires were popping out of coffins and stuff out of the ground. It was pretty good. There was one point where there was a vampire that looked like a young Donald Trump.
Oh, God.
And I was like, oh, what's up, Trump? And you generally, if you talk to them, they'll follow you after to try to keep scaring you, or, once you think they're gone, they pop up again and try to get you. So Trump was obviously following us because he was angry about it. And the best part, I've never seen this happen before. Trump got scared by one of his other guys. So he was following us, and a dude popped out, and he just goes, oh! It was pretty great.
Yeah.
So after that, it was finally like this 3D clown maze, and that was, for some reason, that's usually the worst house. It's kind of usually the one that's the fastest, and it's the one you usually start with, but it had a big line in the beginning, so we ended with it. This year, it was like double the time. I don't know if it was just that.
2 times.
Yeah. And they gave us these really crappy 3D glasses this year, but it enhanced it because they were so crappy you couldn't really see if what was in front of you was real or fake.
Yeah.
So they kind of got us pretty good. That was probably the best house because there were guys like in the wall with they were painted with like the painting of the wall. It'd be like weird like designs and colorful highlighting things, something like planets and stuff, and they'd pop out and scare you. But you couldn't tell if it was a fake guy or a real guy. So yeah, Witch's Woods is always one of the best places to go, but I think that you should never go to a haunted house on opening weekend. I think I learned my lesson because the last couple years, any house we've went on opening weekend has been pretty bad. So I think like they used that weekend to kind of open up the kinks and fix everything. So it wasn't that good.
Yeah, you're the guinea pigs.
So if you want to know, do I give my seal of approval for Witch's Woods? I still do. I think you should still go, but maybe give it another week or two before you do get in. Wait till it's kind of in the middle of October to kind of go there. But yeah, they're usually one of the best haunted houses. Beside moving, I read the first 5 issues of the new Spider-Man run by Nick Spencer. I'm not going to get into it a lot because I've already talked a lot. That's why I don't go first. So now we know it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Spencer, I think his story's really good, but he's not really funny. Everyone online thinks he's the funniest dude. I thought Dan Slott was a much funnier writer, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not getting his jokes. But I really like the new Spider-Man run, but I'm just not a big fan of the humor, I guess, or at least I haven't caught on to it yet. So what did you guys do? Who wants to go?
I'll go.
All right, go for it.
Feeding off of your haunted house story, I recently watched this movie called Hell House LLC. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it.
I am.
at all.
What did you
You
think?
are.
He said, what did you think?
Oh, I'm sorry. My mic, my audio drops out a little bit sometimes. Apologize.
Okay.
So I noticed that the second one came out and was getting some buzz, and I was like, oh, I have never seen this before. I'm going to go back and watch the first one. Watch the first one. John, you might like it because it's a found footage movie.
Okay.
That follows a group of people who are putting on a haunted house tour, and they find this like dilapidated old like inn in this place, like this small like rural community outside of New York City. They go inside, and they start setting up their like haunted house, which I think is like kind of a genius idea for a found footage movie, because like most found footage movies are kind of like a roller coaster ride, like you're just like going in first person view, and essentially like a lot of the bad ones, it's just like a lot of jump scares, right? In this one though, the horror is like a lot more subtle, so it's not like them walking down a hallway and then something just leaps out at you. It's a lot of like smaller things that will like start turning in your direction in the corner. I thought it was really, really effective. I was pretty spooked out by the end of the movie. So then we watched the second one, I think like a night or two after. Not good. Awful. Bad. It's not a good movie.
I was disappointed to hear you say that, because I liked the first one too. I remember watching it, I think a year or two ago when it first came out, and I really liked. I didn't know they did a second one, but I'm kind of glad you told me it sucked now, because I don't think I'm gonna watch it now.
Yeah, it's just like wasted potential, because it's like they bring a new batch of people to the same place, and it's like I can't complain, like I like watching Friday the 13th part like 10, I'll be first in line for like the next installment. That doesn't bother me too much, but it just felt like such wasted potential with the amount of people they had involved in this movie, that like a lot of it just fell really flat and was just like there's just no big payoff. It was lame.
Yeah.
But
That's disappointing.
What's up?
That's disappointing.
Yeah, man, it is what it is. But what's not disappointing though is I started watching Castle Rock on Hulu.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have seen that yet or are familiar with it.
I have not.
Well, essentially, long story short, it's just a TV show that's based and set in like the Stephen King universe.
Okay.
So it's set in like Castle Rock, which is a popular place in his novels. And there's all sorts of like Easter eggs, like Shawshank Prison is present. You'll see like a flash through like an old record of like a dog getting rabies and attacking someone like in Cujo. So like it's a 10-episode series. I believe it's an anthology format, so I believe next season will be something completely different. But for right now, from what I've seen, I think it's like excellently crafted like television story. The production-wise, it looks really good. The music's really on point. Everyone they have for like all the actors in it are like really, really good. It's like my favorite thing at the moment. So that's like the thing I'm really gushing about the most.
Nice. And for you to gush over something, it's got to be pretty good.
Oh, thanks, man. But that's pretty much what I've been consuming. What about you, Jason?
So I I've been watching a lot of horror movies as well. I'm gonna save those for our segment towards the end. Figure we'll be talking
Ooh,
about movies
okay.
anyway. So I'm gonna go with since Kingdom Hearts 3 comes out in January, I've decided I'm gonna play through all the originals.
Opening old wounds here.
Yes.
Opening
yeah.
old
so,
wounds here for me.
So I decided I'm gonna get that whole remix they made for the PS4 and just play through all of them again.
Wait, so what's the deal with the remix? I kind of have fallen out of the loop of video games a little bit. So like, is there like new stuff with
No,
this,
it's
or
essentially just they put Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 as well as like all the side games they made for the handheld consoles. And
yeah,
they,
yeah.
They're going to be on PlayStation?
and
wow.
they remastered the whole thing and made it for PS4. So you can now
that's-
play
okay.
every version of Kingdom Hearts that's ever come out.
Now, is it only PS4 or will it come out for Xbox too? Because I know the third game's coming out for Xbox.
I think this collection is only PS4.
Degenerates. See, I
Yeah.
hate Sony.
I think-
Sony, I hate you even more now.
I think this collection in particular is only
Crappy
PS4.
company.
What I do know is that with the new one that's with Kingdom Hearts 3, there's going to be a version that comes out that's like $100, and it's like Kingdom Hearts 3 Gold Edition or something, and that's going to have a few of the side games in it, but not all of them. So, and that I think is going to come out on Xbox. So we'll be able to do it
Giant
that way.
Keyblade comes with it too, or something.
I hope so for $100. Yeah, holy crap. So I've been playing a lot of Kingdom Hearts 1 over the past week and a half, and
So
yeah,
good.
I forgot how much I loved these games, and just for the novelty of them, and you know, you do even appreciate the frustrations that come with them. Like I played through the Atlantica world again in Kingdom Hearts 1 and realized how much I hated it, and I still hate it now. It was so bad. So I'm hoping I can finish it before Kingdom Hearts 3 comes out, but I don't know. I got a long way to
Well,
go.
you have till January.
January, but I got like 5 games to get
And
through.
I feel they're going to push it back again.
Oh, probably.
They've
yeah.
been pushing it back for, what, 5 years now? Maybe?
Yeah, it was supposed to come out like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been getting pushed back a lot. But
History
real
would
quick,
tell us,
not to cut you off, Dimitri, but if you guys don't know, I've mentioned it on the show many times, but I'll mention it again. My PlayStation, what was it, 2 when 2 came out? My PlayStation 2 crapped the bed right as I was fighting the last boss of
That's
Kingdom
right.
Hearts 2.
I forgot you told me that.
And I've never bought a
Oh.
Sony product after that.
What? You're messing up, dude.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
now that they have this whole thing
Yeah.
collection, and I can't get it on Xbox, I hate Sony even more.
You can get every game in one disc for $50
degenerates.
on PS4.
Degenerates. I don't know. I've never liked them after that. I just don't trust their stuff. I just never bought I've never bought a Sony product after anyone.
Yeah,
no
you're-
TVs, no Walkmans, no nothing. I boycotted Sony after it just didn't work out
Dude,
anymore.
I'm Sony till die, man.
I am
am
too.
Sony to death.
Yep.
Ugh,
I will take
gross.
a PS4 over an Xbox, whatever.
No
any
way.
day of the
I
week.
would never buy an Xbox.
And
Never.
PlayStation's controllers suck anyways. They make your hands feel crap. I almost swore there. They're not good. At least Xbox has the perfect controller for your hands.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it
No, it
does.
doesn't.
You gotta
Yeah, what?
you gotta feel it.
That's
and-
such crap.
That's not crap. Most gamers agree that it has the best controller.
Yeah.
PlayStation's all elongated and the buttons are at random
No, I don't
spots.
think- get
Yeah,
outta
you
here.
guys just love
Yeah.
PlayStation.
Yeah.
Wait till your
Nah,
PlayStation craps out on you during the end of like Kingdom
won't.
Hearts 3.
It won't.
Oh, when it does, and you want to throw it
Nope.
against the wall,
Nope.
then you'll come to the light side.
Yeah, no, I'm already on the light side.
No, I
I'm
don't
already
think
on the
so.
right side of this. So.
Sony's a deplorable company.
Well, whatever. I'm gonna keep enjoying Kingdom Hearts 1 while you sit there not playing Kingdom Hearts 1 with your stupid Xbox. So have fun.
I bet you they'll come out with something for Xbox for it.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the gold edition, but you're gonna have to pay $100.
No way.
Yeah.
What is this collection called?
I think I don't know if it's called gold, but it's Kingdom Hearts 3 something collection. I think it's like the all-in-one collection. And I saw it on the PlayStation Store, so I don't know. Maybe. But if you're saying it's coming out for Xbox, then I guess they'd release that
Well,
edition.
3 is coming out for Xbox.
Yeah. So I'm guessing
Well, I
they'll
don't
do an
know.
all-in-one
I don't
for
know
that.
if the other ones are like, because I know at least the side games were all like Sony exclusive. So I
They
don't know
were.
like what.
Well, no, they were on like Game Boy and stuff, or
Yeah, the Vita.
PSP and stuff. They were
Yeah.
on like handheld stuff.
Right.
Oh, were they also on Nintendo?
I think so. I'm pretty sure they were, or at least one of them was.
They might have been. I
Okay.
don't know.
I think they might have been on both. I'm pretty sure they were. At least one of them was.
Yeah.
Well,
'Cause
either,
I remember working at Best Buy seeing Kingdom Hearts on.
Oh,
a
okay,
game.
yeah.
So unless it was
either
a completely
way,
different game.
reliving that nostalgia for the past week and a half has been pretty awesome. And Kingdom Hearts 1 is like it's good, but there's a lot of parts of it that are just so raw and like just not all that great. So just knowing that like they fixed all that in Kingdom Hearts 2 and I still have that one to get to is pretty cool. So it's been a lot of fun.
Nice.
Yeah, Dimitri, how about you?
Oh boy. Well, first of all, John, I have to agree with you that the Xbox controller is more comfortable, mostly because I have a big hand, so like, it's a bigger controller.
Look at me and my big hands.
It's a comfortable controller. Plus, we
Big
have both.
controller for big boys.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'll use small, but the PS4 system is better, so I'll give you that. So, Jason, I'm sorry to say, and Sam, I think you'll be angry at me once I say this. I have never played a single Kingdom Hearts game.
Gross.
Wow, you're missing
Why
out.
not?
Well, okay, it depends. I mean, do you like Disney and that type of stuff?
I don't mind it.
Okay.
I've just never had the chance to actually play the game.
And did you ever play a Final Fantasy?
Nope.
Oh, Dimitri.
But speaking of PS4, I do want to play the new Spider-Man game. So.
Oh, you should. It's so good.
Yeah. So what I did for the last, forever. So you know how some people rewatch The Office over and over again. It's just kind of something that kind of goes in the
Hell yeah.
background. I don't rewatch The Office. I'm on my 4th round of that '70s show from like the early 2000s.
Oh wow.
Literally
Okay.
the 4th time watching the series
Fourth
over
time.
again.
That's a lot.
Just
Yeah.
back to back, nonstop. Although at this point, I'm literally it's background noise to me, but it's still on. So that's what I've
Okay.
been doing for a very long time now.
I think I've rewatched that '70s show like twice, and I don't think I could do it another time.
I think it's just because it's nostalgic for me because I used to watch it as a kid too.
Yeah.
So I
That
think it
makes
has a
sense.
nostalgia thing for me. But at this point, I'm getting sick and tired of it, so I'm gonna move on once it's over.
Yeah.
So speaking of shows, since we have a little bit more time left, I've talked to Jason about this. I kind of talked to you about it, Dimitri. I watched, in the time since we've had a last show, I've watched Luke Cage Season 2 and Iron Fist Season 2, and I'm very disappointed with both of them.
Really?
Yeah, I don't want to ruin it for anything. We're going to end up talking about it on the show once Jason catches up. But the ending of Luke Cage was probably the worst ending of something I've ever seen in my life.
Wait, Luke Cage season 2?
Yep.
Okay, the very, very, very ending, yes. But what about the season in general?
I thought the season up to episode 12 was amazing.
Okay.
It was almost on the line of beating Daredevil.
Okay.
And then you get that 13th piece of crap episode.
But like the last 30 seconds of the last episode.
no, it's
yes.
not the last. It's maybe the last 10, 20 minutes.
Okay.
And I'll explain it to you when we talk about it on the show eventually. But it kind of just destroyed everything that Luke Cage built in the last 2-3 years, however long it's been out.
Yeah,
It made season 1 and the first part of the whole 12 episodes of season 2 before that irrelevant in my opinion. Like I told Jason, I feel that if you're a non-comic fan or you really aren't into comics, you might be open to this. You might understand it a little bit better. You might like it. But as a comic fan, I don't like it, and it's not Luke Cage, so it made me very angry. The same thing with Iron Fist. Season 2 was a huge improvement from Season 1. Only 10 episodes, so it was nice, short, and sweet. And again, they did the same thing on the 9th episode. They're like, oh, we're going to do this. And I was like, no, they're not. That's not happening. And of course, they do what they say they're going to do. And it's complete horse crap. It's awful. But at least they end the show with giving you kind of hope that something will happen in Season 3 where they'll be going on the storyline of the immortal weapons. So I'm hoping that that's what happens.
I'm looking forward to, hopefully they do the Heroes for Hire thing, because I'm really looking forward to that.
I don't think that's happening now.
Why?
From the ending of Luke Cage.
Oh. Oh no.
I don't think
well,
that's...
who knows? They've done weird stuff like that where like the ending of one episode is a huge event, and the next episode in the first 10 minutes it gets reversed. So.
Yeah, at least with Iron Fist, they're gonna be adapting what it looks like is one of the best Iron Fist stories of all time, a story written by Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction, and I'm really excited for it. But I'm not excited for how they ended the season and what they ended with. It's kind of like how they ended with Luke Cage. What Luke Cage's personality-wise and character-wise is kind of like what they did with Iron Fist. Not the same thing, but he's in a place where you're like, he shouldn't be in this place. He's Iron Fist. He shouldn't be this way.
Interesting.
And that's how they end it. And I just really did not like the endings. If they do this twist ending with Daredevil what is it? The 19th. It's coming back.
Yeah.
What is it? November, December?
It's October.
It's
this
close.
month. Yeah, it's
it's
coming
coming
up
out
that's
this month.
in like 2 weeks.
If I get a twist ending,
Screw that. Somebody show much.
I am done with the Netflix universe.
Ooh.
If it's a crappy ending, I'm done with this.
Like hashtag done? Like for
done.
real done?
Like done.
Wow.
Yeah, like really done. Because this is one of the best. They're adapting one of the best Daredevil stories, Born Again. I mean, after that trailer, if they mess this season up, we're gonna have a problem. And the way that you explained Jessica Jones to me, because I haven't seen it, Jason explained it to me. I haven't watched it yet.
Wait, either season?
The last season.
No, the last one.
It kind of felt.
that you tried to warn me about, and I should have listened.
I told you.
It kind of felt in the same root of everything. They leave a character in a place that you're like, they shouldn't be in this place.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of like all that, build up that they had, all that progression they have is kind of just like slapped in the face with a shovel, little Nicky style.
Yeah, for Jessica Jones, it literally had no direction. There was
No,
like nothing
zero.
happening.
Yeah, zero. And she had, not only did she have no character development, she had character regression. She got worse in season
That's the
2.
word I was thinking of. I couldn't think of it.
So bad.
They all regress.
Yeah.
They all regress.
I mean, but it's a learning process. They're regressing to who they were before, but now they're going to be able to get past that and progress even more.
At least with Iron Fist, he regressed ability-wise opposed to personality-wise.
Okay. Yeah.
But just not happy with it. Very disappointing. Extremely disappointing. So on that note, we're going to take a break, but we'll be back with Marc Guggenheim, and I promise you it won't be disappointing. So stay tuned. Epic episode 150, and we have a really cool guest with us right now. He is one of Marvel's top writers, and he was also one of the men behind the Arrowverse, was the showrunner on Arrow for a long time. Marc, how are you?
Very good, very good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having you on. So, Marc, you've been in comics for a long time. What got you into comics, growing up, or what led you into reading comics, liking comics, and how did you get into the industry?
Well, the first part of the question is a really good question because I honestly don't know. One of my earliest memories was just sitting on the floor of my room of my parents' house, flipping through a Superman comic, and this was like before I could even read. And my mother came in the room, and she thought that she had like a savant or something because, I didn't know how to read, and she thought, "Oh my God, he's a genius." And I was like, "No, I'm just looking at the pictures." But I don't even know, I don't even know where I got the comic book from, quite frankly. So it's always been part of my DNA, just something I've always really loved. As far as how I got into the industry, I'm kind of fond of saying that I had to break in twice. My first comic book gig was a 2-part freelance story of Aquaman. And,
wow, okay.
Those 2 issues so set the comic book world on fire that absolutely nothing happened for me for about a year. So then, quite frankly, and completely separately, about a year later, my manager at the time made a connection with me to Ruwan Jayatekeli, who is no longer at Marvel, but he was sort of acting as the Marvel, liaison with Hollywood. This was during the period where Joe Straczynski was starting to write comic books, and Kevin Smith was writing Daredevil, and Joe and Kevin basically started to open the doors at Marvel for Hollywood writers. And at the time, I was writing on a show called Law and Order, and it had some cachet at the time, and it was enough to sort of create a conversation. But it really took it took 2 bites at the apple in order to break in, and even after I quote unquote broke in at Marvel, it actually took a little bit of time to congeal, because what happened was Marvel hired me to do this. They called it a long shot. It was like originally supposed to be like a 36-page Punisher one-shot, which eventually got published a couple of years back as like a 2-parter. But at the time they commissioned it. It started getting drawn by Leinil Yu, but they did not end up publishing it because it took a long time for Leinil to finish it. So I had sort of broken in, but I hadn't gotten anything published yet. That all changed when Axel Alonso, who had commissioned the Punisher story, at the time he wasn't the editor-in-chief, when after he commissioned the Punisher story, he really liked the script, and he offered me the chance to write the Wolverine tie-in to the Civil War event.
Yes.
And that's really what put me on the map. After that got published, then the phone really started ringing from both sides of the aisle in the comic book industry.
That's where I started to recognize that's where I started to know who you are. I read your Wolverine stuff during Civil War. So
oh, thanks.
Yeah,
that's what introduced me, I think broke me to a lot of people.
Yeah, and it was awesome stuff. It was definitely some really cool stuff.
Oh, thank you.
So something that I wanted to ask some of your this is like an older piece of work that you did. I really enjoyed your Blade run. It was only like 12 issues with Howard Chaykin. Now, did it end because you had nothing else to write? Were you done with the story, or did it get canceled because of sales?
It got canceled because of sales.
No!
I will say we are, I think to date, if I'm not mistaken, the longest running Blade monthly.
Yeah.
So even at 12 issues, we had managed to last longer than other Blade comics. Blade can be a little bit of a tough sell. And in part because I think horror comics don't tend to sell particularly well. And Blade, at its heart, really is a horror comic. So it's always been a struggle, I think, for that character to, to find long-term commercial success, even though he's really great, obviously.
Do you think that, like, I feel like there's been like a big resurgence like in horror lately, like particularly like in film, like definitely in video games, more recently like in literature. Do you think that like the horror comic for something like Blade, or like even like I don't know, like Man-Thing maybe, or something, whatever, like do you think that like a place for that might open up again in the near future?
Yeah, I think everything, everything is always possible. That's one of the things I love about comics is, you never know. I mean, Walking Dead is like one of the all-time most successful comic books around, and that's a horror comic at its heart. So a lot of times I think it's a matter of timing, but also a matter of execution. It's finding a take that resonates for people. And if everyone knew what the audience wanted, everyone would do it. That's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that you really don't know.
Here in Boston, is that correct?
Yeah. I went to law school in Boston, and I decided to stay.
Okay. And so that must have been a stark transition of career, going from being a lawyer to what you've been doing, recently. So what was that transition like?
It was, well, first of all, it was wonderful because it was great to get out of the practice of law. I think, practicing law it's a hard job. It's very, very stressful. The hours are incredibly long. I think when you work out your salary on a hourly basis, you're not making nearly as much money as you think. It's just tough. So, for me, I had been writing on the side since my third year of law school. And when I left, I basically left, with a manager in place, with I wouldn't even say a track record or a reputation in the industry. It was more like I had written a script that had gotten some attention. So I knew that there was like an audience or a potential audience for my writing. So when I quit, it was basically to cut the cord, move out to Los Angeles, and try to get a job. I wanted to work in television, so I scheduled my move to coincide with the period that's known as staffing season, which is usually like March and April, that sort of leads into the new season. Anyway, long story short, it was a pretty big stark difference. I mean, truth be told, it was a big difference just to simply to stop practicing. Forget about practicing and then going to write. I think like there was about a 2 month gap between. Let me see. Yeah, about a 2 month gap between when I quit and when I had the interview for my first job, which was a show called The Practice. And there was only like only a month after that I got hired. So like there was only a 3-month gap between practicing and writing professionally. So it was this very sort of whipsaw kind of experience. I really, I really had to make the adjustment fast.
Right.
So what made you want to get into writing?
That's a great question. I've always enjoyed putting words together. I've always enjoyed the music of language. But I was always putting those efforts towards, basically expository writing, writing college papers, and then as a lawyer writing briefs. It wasn't until my third year of law school that my brother Eric asked if I would co-write a teleplay with him. We did a spec Picket Fences, which was another David Kelly show. And it was only then that I really got bit by the bug to tell stories. And it was sort of really felt like this wonderful combination of the thing that I love to do, which is to put words together in service of, telling a really cool story. That combination was really winning for me. And once I did it, I just wanted to keep doing it.
Definitely. So back to comics again, back to kind of like the Wolverine thing. I felt you had a really tough go with Wolverine, not writing wise, but the way the character was when you took over for him. Then it was a tough time in Wolverine's life. The M-Day happened. A lot of the mutants were gone. The mutants tried to stay out of Civil War. So what was your mind like going into that character? Like, because there was a lot of kind of restraints, I feel, to have to write him.
Yeah, it's funny. I had been reading X-Men and Wolverine, since 1983, 84. So I felt like I had kind of internalized the character in all of his ups and downs. For me, the real question was, how do I get how do I involve Wolverine in this event that felt organic and felt true to his character? Because I think a lot of times when you're doing a tie-in, either it's superficial, like you're tying in trade dress only, as I like to say, or you're tying in a way that feels very forced because you're doing it not for a story reason, but really, quite frankly, for commercial reasons. But when I hit upon the idea of Wolverine, basically being out for revenge, that struck me as a quintessential Logan story. I can completely understand the idea of Wolverine going, out, for payback. That's a very Wolverine-y kind of thing to do.
Yeah, it was definitely very Wolverine-y, but it also felt very organic. It felt really good. It flowed so well, I thought.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, I felt I got very lucky because when they asked me to pitch it, basically they gave me a copy of the first few scripts of Civil War, and when you came up with the idea of Wolverine going after Nitro, I thought, oh well, they're not going to let me do that. They're going to, someone else has already thought of that. Someone else is already going to be doing that. And I was so pleasantly surprised that that particular plot point wasn't spoken for. I was like, oh, that's a nice little bonus, and it worked really well for Wolverine.
That is really awesome. I felt that Wolverine was like the perfect character to go for Nitro, power wise.
Yeah, I love stories where the protagonist is the underdog, and Wolverine. His power set is not exactly compatible with Nitro's. He can't really stand toe to toe with him and sort of trade energy blasts or create an energy shield or something like that. So, it was fun to think about, okay, how is Logan going to win? Despite the fact that he's pretty outgunned on the power department.
So, like, you have a pretty extensive resume for Marvel in terms of, like, the characters you've kind of, like, dipped your fingers in. Is there anyone that, like, you haven't touched upon that like you would love to do, like either like someday in the future or just like even in your head that you're like, man, I would love to just kind of like take this character and just, do whatever with it. But like, is there anyone in particular that like you're very drawn to?
It's funny. I've been so lucky. I've managed to, like you said, touch upon, almost, every major Marvel character at this point. What I haven't had the opportunity to do is sort of do any sort of long sustained run on some of them.
Mhm.
So, in terms of that, the two on my list are Daredevil, just because
Ooh.
superhero lawyer. I've had a chance to write a couple of one shots with him, and he's I've had him sort of cameo and guest star in Spider-Man, but the idea of a sustained Daredevil run, that's at the top of my list. And then the Fantastic Four, again, had them in little cameo kind of moments, but would love one day to, do a really fun, big Fantastic Four story. But, Dan Slott is writing the Fantastic Four, so I think I'll have to wait a good 10 years before that book becomes available.
Yeah, totally.
He's definitely on books for a long time. So you mentioned Daredevil. What do you feel about Charles Soule's run right now?
Oh, I love it. I'm a big fan of Charles as a writer and Charles as a person. And I just love his take on Matt. I think it's funny, post Frank Miller, Daredevil, I think, has become a really tricky character to write.
Yes.
Because you either go sort of full Miller and go really sort of dark and, the underbelly of New York City, or you go, sort of very, bright sky, sort of like, Mark Waid and Chris Samney's run, which, by the way, I absolutely love. But, while I love the Miller take and I love Mark Waid's take, what I really appreciate about Charles is he somehow managed to straddle both worlds. Which I got to tell you is not easy to do. That is a tough trick to pull off tonally, and I think he's done a remarkable job doing that.
Yeah, definitely. He got me to read a whole arc about lawyering, and I didn't get bored at all.
Exactly. Which I admit I found perhaps more. I didn't have to be I didn't have to be sold on that quite as much as other people. He's sort of writing directly into my love of things.
So without spoiling anything, if you were to get Daredevil after Charles, because I know his run's ending soon, they're killing the character, or supposedly, what would you do for the character? What would be kind of like the opening of your first arc, basically, without spoiling anything? You can give that away.
The one thing that I mean, I don't want to like, it's hard to like say like what the, I don't want to, it's hard to like say it without spoiling it, but I would say that I would love to, my take on Daredevil you would feel it's equal part superhero and equal part legal drama.
Nice. All right.
I like that. Yeah.
That would be my goal.
All right. That's definitely some awesomeness there. Now, you mentioned pitching the Wolverine story. What is it like a normal day, like pitching? Like when you go to like a Marvel retreat, how do you pitch a story that you want to do, or pitch for a character that you want?
Well, here's what's really funny. With the exception of the Spider-Man Brain Trust, I've actually never been to a Marvel retreat.
Really?
Yeah, I've never once been.
What?
I know, it's crazy. I've been to like, back when I was doing Young X-Men, we did a retreat for, sort of the X titles. Obviously, we always did retreats for the Spider-Man Brain Trust, but I've never been to like one of those general Marvel Universe, like let's figure out what the next year is, what's the big event that we're tying into, sort of thing. It was always just editors who either I've worked with or who have read my stuff, just calling up and saying, "Hey, we have a need for a Secret Wars tie-in. Do you want to pitch on this?" And 9.9 times out of 10, I say yes.
That is awesome. That is definitely an awesome thing. I'm surprised that you really haven't been to many of the retreats. So I guess this next question will kind of bounce off that. What's the difference between working with Marvel and working with DC? Because you've worked at both. So what would you say is the difference between working with them?
I have to say that the work process is pretty similar. The feel of the universes is different. And it's hard to describe. It's hard to articulate what it is. It really is a feel. The way I sort of describe it is, it's the difference between driving a Ferrari and a Mercedes. They just drive differently. And like I did this run on Justice Society of America where, sort of as a thought experiment, I decided I'm going to write this book the way I write a Marvel book.
Ooh.
And what I quickly discovered was that it's not that the book itself didn't quite work, but that approach didn't quite work. It doesn't want the card does not want to handle that way. If you're being true to who these characters are, the characters feel different. They write differently. Probably the best articulation of the differences in the universes is the Avengers JLA crossover that Kurt Busiek wrote, where I think he really sort of captured, the different feel of the universes. And it's not enough, or it's too superficial to say that, well, DC's really hopeful and Marvel's really grim and gritty, or DC's very fantastical and Silver Age and Marvel's more of the world outside your window. A lot of people say those, and like most generalities, they have some superficial appeal. But the truth of the matter is that I think it just kind of goes deeper than that. These are different kinds of characters, and I'm very much, my process as a writer, particularly when I'm at the script stage, is I kind of let the characters talk to me and tell me what they're going to say and how they're going to act and what they're going to do. And that, all I can tell you is that the characters, that I was writing in the DC universe were telling me different things and wanting to do different things than the Marvel characters I've written do.
So to kind of bounce off that again, what one of the two companies, sorry about that word blurb there, which one of the two companies gives you more freedom with their characters, would you say?
That's a good question. I would say, honestly, it doesn't vary by the company. It varies by the nature of the character, and it varies by the where that character is in their sort of publishing span. Sometimes, like, for example, when I took on Blade, they let me chop off his hand and, give him a new gun, because at the end of the day, it's, it was Blade. It's a book that everyone knows is eventually going to get canceled. It's,
which is disappointing. Because
I know, it's crazy. That's very, very different from like writing, a Superman comic where it's Superman and they've got a different level of protection for him. So it really varies. I wouldn't say that one company is more permissible or lenient than the other. It has more to do with, who are you writing it, and at what point in their history are you writing them?
So a quick aside to give you a little praise here. Blade's my favorite movie of all time. Just, it does everything I need. But I felt you got the essence of the character the best, beside his older comics, back in the day. I love the stuff that you did. The hand stuff was really cool. It was really cool.
I love that run. I love the fact that we've got, in the modern era, it's 12 issues done by the entire, the completely same creative team.
Which doesn't happen a lot nowadays.
It does not. So that's the thing. It kind of exists as its own, special little thing. And I think it seems to have aged pretty well. I do get probably more compliments on the Blade run than I do on almost anything else I've written.
Wow.
People really seem to have dug it.
So I wanted to ask about your work writing for video games, because I've seen that you've done a lot of that in your career. And I wanted to ask, what is to you the most important aspect of writing for a video game contrasted to writing for a TV or a movie?
Well, I'd say it's two things. It's providing the illusion of control and the illusion of freedom. Because the truth is, on any video game, I don't care, even if it's a sandbox game, you don't have freedom. The game designers are very cleverly, guiding you towards certain outcomes and to get you to do certain things. So even if it's an open world, it's really not that open. But part of the job, I feel, as a writer is to help help the game designers provide that illusion of control. The second thing is I always tried really hard in my video game writing to push, as much as the technology would allow, to push the boundaries of what do you consider emotional in a video game. I don't think people really, are buying video games in order to experience a deeply moving, character-driven scene. But I think I always enjoyed finding moments within the various video games I worked on to try to provide those kinds of dramatic scenes. And what I always found interesting about it was the challenge of sort of creating those opportunities amidst all the action and the fighting and everything that goes into a video game, but also to do so within the bounds of what is technologically feasible. In a lot of video games, those sort of cutscenes, you're doing that through motion capture. It's been a while since I've written a game, back when I was doing it, the motion capture technology was good, but did not pick up a lot of subtle nuances in performance that the video games that are being produced today do. So it's, I enjoyed, working within the limitations of the technology as it existed at the time.
So do you think you'll ever go back to video game writing at any time, or is that part of your career that you're done with?
It's a good question. I love video games. I love the idea of writing for video games. The time commitment necessary is massive. Yeah. And it's kind of like, people always ask me, like, are you going to write another novel? And it's like, I would love to write another novel. Again, the time commitment is massive. So I think if I were to do a video game now, it would probably have to be something like I'm co-writing so that I could, balance it along with all the other things I'm working on. But I would love to. It would be a lot of fun to go back into that world, because I really enjoyed it. One of my favorite video game gigs was I did the script for Call of Duty 3, and right. What was so wonderful about that gig was it was actually while I was writing the Wolverine Civil War arc, actually. And I was doing both over hiatus. It was between when I was working on a show called Injustice and when I started working on a show called Brothers and Sisters. And I was doing it over the summer hiatus, and I basically had an office at Activision. And I was working side by side with the developers, which is something I'd never had the opportunity to do on a game before, quite frankly, or since. And the ability to be able to run down the hall and say, hey, I had this interesting story idea. Can we change the gameplay here to reflect this or that? Can we kill off this character? Or, it'd be really unexpected. That was incredibly gratifying. That was a lot of fun. That was probably my best summer. Writing that video game and writing Wolverine. That was like, two gigs I was really enjoying.
Yeah, definitely. And one of your characters that you're very familiar with, Spider-Man, is enjoying a lot of success with the video game that came out this year.
I know. It's actually got me. It's got me thinking very hard about buying a PlayStation 4.
Well, I was going to ask, have you been able to consume it at all, or been able to see any of it? Because it's going gangbusters at the moment. So
I know. No, I haven't. Literally, I'm 2 seconds away from. From just buying a PS4 and really just for that game. A friend of mine had said that there's very few games that are worth buying a whole system for, and Spider-Man is one of them.
I would agree with that statement. Yeah, I don't think that's an overstatement at all.
That's cool to hear. So one of the I probably do it. My problem is my birthday just passed, and I missed my opportunity to ask for one.
So you've written for comics, you've written for video games. I was thinking maybe we could talk about a little bit about like TV. and like what kind of the challenges are that you would face writing characters specifically for television versus like a comic book.
Well,
Or
yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, probably the biggest difference is that you're writing for another human being. When I write the way I like to think of all the different forms of writing that I do is it's who am I writing for? Obviously, you're always writing for an audience ultimately, but when you write a script, you're not your work product as a writer unless you're writing prose, unless you're writing a novel. Your work product as a writer is not the thing that's seen by the audience or the reader. So you always are not writing for the audience, you're writing for the person or people who are ultimately producing the final work product. So like in the case of comic books, I am writing for the artist and I'm writing to the artist, and I'm, in my scripts, I'm talking to the artist and saying, let's try this, or this is what I have in mind there. Whereas when I'm writing in television, I'm writing for, obviously, the department heads and director and everything, but I'm also really writing for the actors, and I'm writing with their voices in mind and writing, for what I think is in their wheelhouse. Now, in that sense, it's very similar to what I write in comics, which is in comics, I try to write, I try not to ask for things that I think the artist is going to have a difficult time pulling off. I try to write towards the artist's strengths and away from their weaknesses. Similarly, with actors, you're trying to write towards what's in their wheelhouse and away from what might be a little more challenging. That's not to say that you never challenge the artist or the actor. You do. That's how you get sometimes the best material. But I think writing with an eye towards who your collaborators' strengths and weaknesses are, I think it's just a helpful thing to do. It's a helpful exercise.
I have another question actually about specifically about the TV front. So like obviously comic book like animated series have like always been pretty popular as far as I can remember. And it seems like live action shows have kind of have different, like they ebb and they flow in terms of quality, so like the Hulk was really popular.
Yep.
But for instance, something like Birds of Prey obviously isn't around anymore, or like the Blade TV show. So when you guys started out like the Arrowverse, did you imagine that it would have gone like this far popularity wise?
Oh, never in a million years. Never in a million years. I mean, truth be told, our bar was we want to avoid embarrassment.
Wow.
You have to understand. Greg Berlanti and I, we were just coming off of the Green Lantern experience. Mm-hmm. In fact, Green Lantern was released in the summer when we first started talking to Warner Brothers and the CW about doing Arrow. So, that experience was very sort of very raw in our memories, and the whole goal was how do we avoid screwing up two green named DC comic characters.
Were you scared that the studio would have like cold feet or anything like that?
No, yes and no. I think we were more scared about losing control, because that's really fundamentally what happened on Green Lantern. At Green Lantern, we wrote the script with Michael Green. We did several drafts of it, and then it left our hands and got rewritten by another writer, and got produced by another director. Originally, Greg was going to direct. So we kind of lost control of it. So the big lesson that we took away from it is if we're gonna do it, do any of these characters, we have to maintain control, and that's not out of ego. It's more out of, if it's gonna suck, we want it to suck on our vision. If we're gonna go down. If we're going to get tagged for doing bad work, that's all well and good. That goes with the territory. But let's get tagged for doing our own bad work as opposed to, watching it be, mangled by someone else.
So like, I don't know if you have an answer off the top of your head, but like, obviously we live in a day and age where Twitter is a very everyday occurrence. like what's like? Can you recall like the worst form of criticism you've ever received from like a rabid fanboy?
Worst form of criticism. I'll tell you. Well, the nastiest or the worst, because they're two different things.
I mean, I guess the most like eye-rollingly bad, just like wow, like shut up, dude. Everyone has an opinion, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny. I just saw something. I had tweeted out something about Jeff Flake, and his decision to vote yes on Kavanaugh. And I tweeted out something like, you can't spell coward without Flake. And someone tweeted back, you can't spell racist without Guggenheim, and spelled out my name. And I was like,
wow.
Whoa.
Whoa.
What the hell? And then I, of course, went onto his profile, and he's extremely right-wing and big-time Trump supporter, which is fine, but also like a big Arrow fan. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I think, really, to answer your question, I think the hardest thing that's been to swallow is, you can tell me I'm a bad writer, you can tell me I'm a hack. I get all that. What actually really bothers me is when people, and this hasn't just happened to me, this has also happened to pretty much every other writer of Arrow who's been on Twitter. People love to call us racists or misogynists because of storylines that they don't like. A lot of people like to sort of trot out, they must be sexist if they don't write Felicity the way we want to see Felicity written. And, that is problematic to me for a couple of reasons. One, it feels especially hurtful, but also it's, there is real sexism and real racism in the world. And these words have power, and they have meaning, and they should have power, and they should have meaning. And when you use them to complain about a fictional storyline, I think you rob them of their power, and you diminish the importance of actual sexism and actual racism. When you turn it into just a punchline, that is, I think that's more destructive than anything else. That's the stuff that really bothers me. Call me a bad writer, complain. I've read, there have been tweets where I've read, and people have said, you dropped the ball on this, or this character turn felt forced, or, this moment wasn't earned. And I'll read it and I'll go, you know what? Yeah, they're right. They've got a point. Absolutely. So I've definitely read criticism online that even when it was, impolitely stated, I could understand the criticism behind it and go, okay, yeah, I get it. I mean, look, we produce, Arrow is 23 episodes a season. It's very, very hard to get it right all the time. You're producing too much content too fast. So there's a lot of places for very valid criticism, which again is one of the reasons why, why are you making it personal? Just, you don't have to gild the lily by making it nasty. You can just say your criticism. If it's valid, it's valid. Even if it's just your opinion, that's valid. I get that. There's no reason to be nasty on top of it.
So, Mark, you said that, the vision you had for Green Lantern was kind of muddied up. What did you want for the character that got changed?
Well, I'll tell you. First of all, I love to point out that with a very 2-second Google search, you can find our first draft. We did 5 drafts, and it being the first draft is not the most polished draft, but it is it's a very good representation of what our original intentions were. I wouldn't even say that it was stuff about the about the character, though. Hal's struggle with fear and overcoming his fear and learning to sort of exorcise his demons, that probably came across a lot clearer in our original draft than it did in the finished movie. But also there were things we were trying to do in terms of heart and humor that kind of got lost along the way as the film ultimately got made.
So one last Green Lantern question. I promise we'll jump back to comics after that. How did you feel about the whole Deadpool end credit scene?
I loved it. I watched it with my wife, and I think I embarrassed her because I laughed so loud in the middle of the theater because I thought it was the funniest thing ever. I really, really did. It was just I'm glad that both Ryan and myself and hopefully Greg as well, that we're all able to laugh about it at this point. We've all since gone on to do some pretty good things, and Ryan's obviously doing well. Greg's, got a gajillion shows on the air. He probably will have sold, 3 more shows by the time this podcast is over. Michael Green, our co-writer, just had a year where he had 4 movies made, and one of them was nominated for an Academy Award. Everyone's doing okay.
Which film was that?
That was Logan.
Oh, yeah.
That was Logan. So everyone's doing okay. We seem to have survived. Though it's funny, like when I saw the first screening, the first cut of Green Lantern, it was about 6 months before the movie came out, and I came home and I told my wife I have to book as many movies as humanly possible in the next 6 months because after this movie comes out, no one's going to hire me to write a movie. And fortunately, that did not turn out to be the case for either me or Greg or Michael. So we managed to survive.
So we'll definitely get back to TV and stuff, but I want to segue back to comics a little bit because, I'm a huge fan of comic books, and I have you here so I can pick your brain and stuff. So as you mentioned earlier, you were in the Spider-Man Brain Trust in the early, mid-2000s?
Yeah, it was in the mid-aughts.
Mid-2000s, and you got to work with some of my favorite Spider-Man characters. You were the creator of the creator of his daughter Anna. So how did that feel to create that character?
Spider-Man's daughter Anna?
No, Kraven the Hunter.
Oh, Kraven. I'm sorry. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Spider-Man didn't have
Kraven's daughter.
Yeah, actually, that was so much fun. That was one of those. Had an idea in the retreat because one of the things, the way this came about was we were talking a lot about Kraven, and really we all loved Kraven the Hunter. We all loved that character, and yet at the same time, the whole storyline, where Kraven dies is such a powerful comic, and it's such a great comic.
Yeah, one of the best stories of all time.
Yeah, it's one of the best Spider-Man stories. I agree. One of the best Spider-Man stories of all time. We didn't want to, sully it by undoing, its sort of big takeaway. So, I forget honestly where the idea came from, but I thought, well, maybe the best way to sort of have our cake and eat it too is, what if Kraven had a daughter? And more to the point, what if Kraven's daughter blames Spider-Man for her father's death? That seems to be a very compelling, motive for an antagonist. So that was great. And also, I will say, like the other thing that made that arc so wonderful for me as an experience was to have Phil Jimenez draw it. I'd always been a long time fan of Phil's work, and I was dying for an opportunity to work with him, and he did an amazing job. That was a fun arc.
Yeah, Kraven's first hunt was definitely a fantastic arc, but some of the best Spider-Man ever, I think, was the gauntlet going into the Grim Hunt. So talk about that a little bit.
I tell you that my recollection, bear in mind this is like a while ago, my recollection was that was Joe Kelly's brainchild. That Joe, I'm trying to remember which retreat it was at, but the idea of essentially Spidey running a gauntlet, and maybe it was someone else's idea, but I want to give credit to Joe, and I think we all sort of had the philosophy that probably all of our favorite Spider-Man stories, with a couple of exceptions, but all of our favorite Spider-Man stories are really born out, and Kraven's Last Hunt is actually a great example of this, is the quality of the story tends to be proportional to the amount of suffering that Peter goes through. So that that whole idea behind that story really was how difficult can we make this for Peter, and that's the thing. We never really talked about it in terms of it being Spider-Man. We always talked about it in terms of being Peter. Even when Peter was wearing the mask, we were like, we never in the room said it's Spider-Man or Spidey. It's Peter. It's always Peter going through whatever we're putting him through. And I think that's the, to me, that's the essence of writing that character. I think, when I think Clark Kent becomes Superman, he really is becoming Superman. And when Batman becomes Batman, he's becoming Batman. But, underneath that mask, it's always Peter Parker.
I absolutely agree, yeah. Definitely. So you worked on Spider-Man for a good amount of time. What's one of the villains that you'd never got to work with that you wish you could have?
Ooh, good question. Well, Kraven, quite frankly, and the Lizard, the Kraven the Lizard, and I had this a take on the Rhino that I was really, really excited by, and really, really wanted to write. And I was around that time I was running. I started running the show called Flash Forward, and it was taking up all of my time to the point where I couldn't write that arc. So Joe Kelly ultimately wrote it, and of course did a much better job with it than I ever would have, because he's crazy talented. That was the thing about the Brain Trust. It's it was both inspiring and kind of depressing to look around the room and you see there's Mark Waid, there's Joe Kelly, and there's Eb Wells and Dan Slott and Bob Gale and and Fred, and I'm of course blanking on Fred's last name because I'm a terrible person. And you're looking around the room and going wow, I'm the weakest link in this chain. That's this is a deep bench. This is very intimidating. But at the same time, that's what made it fun. Is you got a chance to, I do think being around such talented people, you can't help but raise the level of your game just a little bit.
So, if you were given the option to write Spider-Man again, would you do it?
I would. I would, mainly because I've always sort of felt, well, first of all, the nature of what we were doing with the whole One More Day and the Brain Trust was we all got a chance to write Spider-Man, but we never had a chance to sort of do our own run. Right. It was always this sort of collaborative effort. So I would love to write, be able to write Spidey. Also, and like I said, because, Flash Forward sort of started towards the tail end of my tenure on Spider-Man, I felt like I left it with, not having had the opportunity to do my best work. I just felt like it's Spider-Man. You always want to reach for greater heights. I don't know if there is a run that I could do that would satisfy myself, but the opportunity to try again would not be something I turned down.
So one last Spider-Man question, and then we'll move on to X-Men. Do you feel that Spider-Man has had this resurgence since Marvel and Sony has kind of made that deal of the movies? And what is your favorite movie Spider-Man?
Ooh. I don't know if Spider-Man's had a resurgence or not. It's always sort of hard to tell. I gotta tell you, my favorite movie Spider-Man is Tom Holland. I love that take. Even though it's funny, it's it's not the take that it's not the take that I, as a Spider-Man fan, truly wanted to see, in the sense that I don't like Spider-Man with a suit full of gadgets and everything, and
right.
An AI that he can talk to. But I will say this: I understood and appreciated why they did that. After so many Spider-Man movies, you do have to change it up, and you do have to make it different. But I am so in love with Tom Holland as Peter Parker, and I'm so in love with the whole approach that they've taken to Peter's character, that I go, ooh, if I could have my cake and eat it too, it would be to see that Tom Holland Spider-Man character with that take on the character of Peter, stripped from some of the accoutrement that Tony was able to give him. But that is honestly, it's such a nitpicky little note. I actually even feel bad saying it, just because it is so well done. It is just a phenomenally well realized version of Peter.
Yeah, I think they really got the core of Peter right. I think the other movies,
Yes,
in their own right, was good, but they really finally got Peter, right, the core of him, the core of his character right, and I think that's why he's definitely the best Spider-Man.
yeah, I agree. Like that's the thing. It's so interesting. He just has that want to root for him quality, that real lovable, like even when he screws up, his heart was in the right place quality that is so apparent in the original Stan Lee Steve Ditko issues, which was my introduction to Spider-Man. That I just can't imagine now anyone else in the role, even though obviously the other actors have done a nice job. I will say the first act of the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans, that is also pretty strong. That's a super strong first act. That whole sequence where he learns about his powers and slowly starts to get better at using them. That's pretty magical stuff too.
Yeah, definitely. So let's segue to X-Men a little bit because I do want to get to Arrow and everything. And I know we talked a lot of comics, so I only got a couple more comic questions for you. So your X-Men run, X-Men goal, it's been awesome. I feel that you've brought the X-Men back to an 80s feel. I think since no one's kind of given me that feel of X-Men since Chris Claremont, and you've done that. So I think that you've done such an awesome job. Now, did you get to pick the team, or did Marvel say, hey, you got to write these guys?
I got to pick the team.
That's
I actually
awesome.
still can't believe it. Yeah, I got to pick the team. There was one character who I wanted to use, and couldn't because that character was otherwise spoken for. But one out of an entire team, I can live with that. That's I was expecting to have to make a lot more compromises in terms of the roster.
Now, can you let us know who you weren't allowed to, who they wanted in, or you want to keep that?
Yeah, I can say it because I don't think it's it's been a while. It was Rogue.
Okay.
Because Rogue was busy on Uncanny Avengers.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So at the time, but it's like, okay, I got you. I understand. No problem. That's a quality problem. I got everybody else. I can't complain.
So, like I said, you gave it a more classic feel. And I feel that you didn't, you paid homage to Claremont, but you did your own thing. Was that what you were going for, to kind of have that classic 80s feel?
Yeah, very much so. It was very much, I think the thing about where the X-Men were at the time, we started the whole Resurrection relaunch was, they had taken it on the chin so many times, and they were so scattered, and they were living in limbo, and I think literally and figuratively. And it's not, by the way, I think like all the runs, that sort of precede it were very good. It's not about, it's not about, the stories that were being told. I think one of the things I love about comics is the fact that because you're basically telling the longest serialized narratives in any medium, there's, with the exception of maybe like soap operas, no other story goes on for decades and decades and decades. And every character or franchise at some point in its history, and if it's a long history, it's multiple points in its history, you need to sort of stop and like not reboot, but reset and reorient and sort of get back to the basics. And that was very much my intention. It's like, I just want to, a lot of shit has happened to the X-Men. And that's part and parcel of what makes the X-Men is like, it's bad stuff happening to them. But how do we sort of reset and get back to, get back more to the core idea of the X-Men are a group of superheroes who are trying to defend a world that hates and fears them. Like, it's, get back to that core conceit. And yes, it was Chris Claremont's writing that got me into the X-Men in the first place. So that's the, that's the dragon I'm chasing. But I'm always, for myself, I'm always setting myself up to fail because there's no way I'm ever going to reach, even at my highest high, the lowest low of Chris's run, particularly his first, seminal run on Uncanny. So, I'm always sort of chasing it, but it was a lot of fun to write. I really enjoyed those 36 issues.
I think you need to give yourself a little bit more credit, because I feel that, your thoughts on Kitty Pryde and how you handled her, nobody's handled the character that well since Chris.
Oh, wow. That's really high.
Yeah.
That's incredibly high praise. Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. That means a lot to me.
I thought your Kitty Pryde was definitely special. She's one of my favorite characters, so.
She was the character that really introduced me to the X-Men, because my first issue of X-Men was Uncanny 139, which it's not the first appearance of Kitty Pryde, but it's the first issue where she joins the X-Men.
Yeah.
It's the Welcome to the X-Men, Kitty Pryde, hope you survive the experience issue. And I basically feel like I have followed, my experience with the X-Men has kind of mirrored Kitty's experience with the X-Men, right down to, she got to, run the school and run the team, and I got to write the book.
So, I have to ask, you could tell from your writing that you love Kitty, and you really like the interaction between her and Colossus. So what happened with the wedding? Was that your plan all along to kind of do that twist? Or, did Marvel kind of step in and be like, let's change this up?
No, this was a Marvel thing. Actually, it came out of one of those retreats that I've never been to. Basically, it came up in a retreat that I was going to marry Peter and Kitty, and there were some concerns about, if Peter and Kitty get married, does that essentially age up Kitty? Does that age up, the person who, was conceived to be the youngest X-Men? Now, obviously, Kitty has grown and matured. She's no longer the 13-year-old girl that she was in X-Men 139. But, it's funny. Axel Alonso had called me about it, and he said, "You of all people should sort of be sensitive to this," referring to my time on Spider-Man, because the One More Day period was, the Brand New Day period was after One More Day, which had undone the Peter Parker Mary Jane Watson marriage.
Yes.
So I totally got it, and I understood. And also, look, at the end of the day, comic books is a collaborative medium. And I'm not the showrunner of X-Men, even if I'm the writer of X-Men. At the end of the day, Marvel's the showrunner. So just as, the writers who work for me, have to, at the end of the day, do what I tell them to do. I have to do what Marvel tells me to do. And my goal really was, okay, they basically said, we want, Kitty to leave Peter at the altar. We want Gambit to propose to Rogue. And I sort of took it upon myself to, to do as good a job of that as I possibly could. I mean, that's the thing. I felt like what was tricky about that was I didn't want the issue to feel like just a twist for the sake of a twist. I didn't want it to feel unmotivated. And I also didn't want people hating Kitty for leaving Peter, and I didn't want people to resent Rogue and Gambit for, essentially getting, I didn't want them accused of taking over a failed wedding. So I thought there were just some interesting writing challenges, and I love a good writing challenge. And that's, quite frankly, what was, I think, so rewarding about getting a chance to work on that issue. Because I was able to, I think, make those turns, those emotional turns happen in a way that, didn't feel like it came out of left field and felt true to everyone's character and really, quite frankly, protected the characters. I don't think anyone comes across as unlikable or selfish or mean-spirited in that issue. At least that's my hope.
And it was really cool that you still kept them together, but you just had them slow things down. I think that was the right way to go. But I wish, as a fan, they did get married. But it is what it is.
Yeah, me too. Well, one day. You never know.
One day. Hopefully you get to write it.
It's well, I really hope I get to write. I feel like I've got. I would like to think I have first dibs, but it's comics. You never know.
So finally, I guess last comic question, then we'll get into like the producing and Arrow aspect because I want to hit on that. And I'm sure you do too. X-Men Gold ended. Are you continuing on with X-Men? What's your next project? If you can talk about it.
I can't, only because I haven't set up the next comic book project yet.
Oh wow.
I'm waiting to sort of see. There's something that's in the works that is. I can't say it's a new project. It's actually a very old project. It's a project that I've been trying to get finished forever. So that looks like we're inching towards the 10-yard line. So that's awesome, but I can't talk about it as yet. And as far as something new on the comic book side, I definitely would love to, set something else up. I haven't quite figured out what that's going to be just yet.
So now, will this be with Marvel or DC? Can you say that, or you can't?
The long gestating project. That's for Marvel.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm dying to tell you about it because it would resonate well in this conversation.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I do hope you do get back to the X-Men because, like I said, you had a nice grasp on X-Men. I thought it was really great.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. All
right, so now we'll get to the producing side of things, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So, you kind of touched upon it briefly about how, getting into Arrow, you thought that it wasn't going to work out and stuff. So.
No, I didn't. It's not that. I wasn't sure. We weren't sure, and we
skeptical.
We weren't going in with the goal of we're going to create a hit or we're going to create a universe. We went in with the goal of let's not embarrass ourselves. That's all. I think Greg and I, by that point, we'd done enough TV shows together and separately to know. And it's like what I said earlier on. You can never predict. You have no idea. What will resonate with people and what won't. But I think even at our most optimistic, we never quite envisioned, what Arrow became and what the Arrowverse became.
Yeah, it definitely became a phenomenon, and I love it. I love watching Arrow, Flash, all those shows. They're always a joy. They once the fall comes, I'm happy to see them come again. So
That's great to hear. Thank you.
What would you say is the biggest hardship that you had during season 1?
Ooh, I want to say season 1. Everything was hard. Everything had to be invented. Everything had to be conceived of from the ground up. We were doing reshoots and pickups. It was we couldn't even get an episode in that was like up to our standards. There were just so many things that we were learning. When you do network television like that, you're learning as you go. And the only tool you really have is to reshoot stuff, which unfortunately is very time consuming and very money consuming. And, as the, sort of the fare meter keeps ticking upward, so is your blood pressure. That was really a struggle. We got a lot of notes from the network in the studio. That was less than fun sometimes. But, I think it was, I would say it was definitely the hardest, most challenging year of my career for sure. Not even a question. But, at the same time, nothing worthwhile is ever easy. And, I think the show is what it is because of all those hardships, because of all that heartache. So I think, I certainly wouldn't change anything. It all happened for a reason.
So I'm curious because I actually don't really know the answers to this question at all. So maybe you could shed some light on it. So I know, like in comics, they plan most things fairly far in advance. I'm curious what's that like with like TV, because I imagine like you plan out like a season, right? But there's at the same time there's like an overarching kind of thing that ties different shows together. So I'm curious like how far in advance you guys go dealing with like that.
I would say pretty far in advance. Basically, at the beginning, and I think all the shows work this way. At the beginning of the season, sometimes even before the end of the previous season. Like I'll speak directly to Arrow. So like with Arrow, we obviously, for production reasons, have to finish the first script. Finish the last script before the final episode is shot and put through post-production. So there's a good chunk of time where the showrunners are working on the show and the writers have, quote unquote, nothing to do. Well, they don't have nothing to do. They're working on big picture ideas for the next season. So, what we'll end up doing is we'll do a sort of a mini camp for the next season at the tail end of the previous season, and then go on a vacation, and then come back and do another mini camp of about a month, plotting out the big broad strokes, the tent poles of the season. And that's not to say that things don't change. They often do, but I always say it's much more preferable to go into a season with a game plan that you change than with no game plan at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense. Another question, though, is, I feel like I guess like every summer, you always see a think piece come out on some like entertainment website about superhero movies, and I guess TV in this case too, just being like bloated and like it's gonna, like the bubble's gonna pop. I'm curious how you feel about that, and if that produces any anxiety when you guys plan these shows so far in advance.
Oh, good question. I will tell you, they produce no anxiety whatsoever. For one thing, I think those think pieces at this point have pretty much proven that they're not right.
Yeah.
Now that's not to say that the bubble will not burst. It's because all bubbles burst. That's what makes them a bubble.
Yeah.
But the thing is that those those pieces are always saying, well, the bubble's going to burst next year. Well, that was 3 years ago. So, so they're wrong. They're right insofar as the bubble will eventually burst. That's hardly a revelatory concept. But they're very wrong about when it's going to happen. And I think we're now at the point where no one knows when it's going to happen. And I also think that even once the bubble does burst, that doesn't mean that all superhero movies are going away and all superhero shows are going away. I think what we've really seen here is the firm establishment of a genre. And just like there are always going to be Westerns, even though no one's making as many Westerns as they used to,
Mm-hmm.
just like, there used to be like disaster movies all over the place, and there still are today, but not as many as they used to. You just basically, the water will find its proper level. I certainly, no question, every year we keep, asking ourselves, and I think the audience is asking, well, how many is too many? And it's remarkable, and I truly don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think anyone else does either, because we haven't found that bubble yet. We haven't found that tipping point. One day we probably will.
So, yeah, I'm curious if like it's also partially revitalized. I mean, there's revitalized in like so many facets, so many ways. But I'm curious if the success of something like Deadpool and the Marvel Netflix shows that are kind of more like a hard, mature rating, if I guess expanding to like an age range that acknowledges that fans are that age and are into like material that would be considered mature. I'm curious if that has an effect on like its, I guess, like expanded runtime for, I guess, in terms of the bubble, which I'm also curious if like there's a project like that in mind that like you would like to tackle someday.
Oh, good question. Well, I will say for sure, I think the next phase of this golden age of superhero television and movies that we're living in. The next phase is certainly an expansion of what types of stories a superhero movie or TV show can tell. We're absolutely headed towards that. Like if New Mutants works, New Mutants is a take. It seems to be the most from the trailers at least. It seems to be the most aggressive take on a horror movie done with a superhero property. Mm-hmm. So, so that stuff is, I think, gonna, if those things are successful, that will lead to a longer lifespan for the bubble. Hopefully what happens is that all of these properties start to evolve and change to the point where we almost have to come up with a new definition for what a superhero movie is, because hopefully we're doing different kinds of movies. Like it could be a horror, it could be a thriller, it could be a comedy, it could be a mix, and all that makes them a quote unquote superhero property is they're based on the source material as a comic book. But that's I think that's been going on for quite some time. I mean, I don't think when Blade came out, the movie came out, I don't think people said that's a superhero movie. It felt like an action horror movie. And that's because, it was an action horror movie. In fact, the only thing that even made it feel superhero-y was the fact that the source material happened to be a comic book. If the source material was a novel, I don't even think we collectively would be talking about it as a superhero movie today.
Hell yeah.
So as a showrunner and as a writer, you're dealing with characters that people have a strong passion for, that they have a strong love for. And I'm curious, but you're a creator. So I'm curious, how hard is it to balance, wanting to put your creative influence into a character, but also, honoring that character and, making a character that both you love, but that the audience loves as well. Is that a really hard thing to balance, or have you learned to master that over the years?
I don't think anyone's ever learned to master it, quite frankly. It's always a challenge. I think, the place I and all the other showrunners and Greg come from is we first start off with, we love these characters as characters. We do love these comic books, and you have to have a love for them, or at the very least a respect for them, in order to write them well and write them in a way that's compelling. I as a writer don't approach things from the standpoint of what makes this character likable, or what are audiences going to like about this character. I tend to, because I think if you let the audience into your process too soon, I think the project becomes very cynical. You stop writing and you start trying to game the audience. And I think that's a very, very slippery and dangerous slope. So, rather, my favorite approach is approach the source material with respect and approach the source material with affection, and always try really hard to get at the spirit of those characters and the spirit of the franchise. And even within that, you can change things. I mean, take Arrow, for example. Like, we in the comics, Oliver Queen was an orphan, and he had no siblings, and we kept his mother alive, and we gave him a sister, and that to me is a great example of changing the source material, but not doing it in a way that fundamentally alters the source material. I'll give you a very specific example. Oliver Queen can still be Green Arrow and not be an orphan. Batman cannot be Batman and have parents.
Totally agree.
Right. That's you really have to ask yourself, like, what are you changing that is sort of within the bounds of the character and the franchise, and what can't you change? I'll give you an example. Like J.J. Abrams wrote this, quite frankly, amazing Superman movie. he wrote a Superman movie that was amazing, I should say. But spoiler alert, really old spoiler alert, the Krypton doesn't blow up.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Whoa.
it does not blow up. And it's like, you know what? I read it. It's a phenomenal screenplay. It's a phenomenal movie. What it's not is a phenomenal Superman movie.
Right.
Because it's very, very. I don't know how you do Superman if he's not, the last of his kind, or, I guess among the last of his kind. Just like I don't know how you do. I don't know how you do Spider-Man without at least the backstory of Uncle Ben's death, and more specifically Peter's complicity in Uncle Ben's death. Even Spider-Man: Homecoming, even the Tom Holland Spider-Man. Thank God they didn't show us the death of Uncle Ben for the 20th time in 3 years.
Yeah, I agree.
I completely applaud that decision, but clearly that character is written from the perspective that he had that experience, because that experience is what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. So you've got to, I think, sort of dig down and get at the fundamental DNA, and outside of the fundamental DNA, then you can change stuff. That's not to say that you should change stuff just to change it or to put your mark on it. The truth of the matter is, we had very good reasons why we gave Oliver Queen a mother and a sister. Not the least of which is we wanted to surround Oliver with other characters. We wanted it to be an ensemble show. We wanted there to be people for him to emote to, and who could emote to him, and who he had to protect his secret from, and all these sort of interesting things. So I think again, it's you just have to ask yourself what's the nature of the character, and not to be a dead horse, but I think the whole exercise of figuring that out really does start with having an appreciation and a love of the characters. If you don't have a love of the characters, it's very hard to determine what's essential to them.
So, Mark, I have 3 more questions for you, and then we'll end things, because I know we went pretty long here. But you're just so great to talk to. So,
thank you.
One thing I need to ask you is...
You guys are good for my self-esteem. I'm going to cancel my therapy tonight. I don't need it anymore.
So, you are the co-creator of Brett Mahoney, the detective in the Daredevil show.
Yes.
Did they come to you for any advice on him?
No.
And do you think they did him justice?
I absolutely thought they did him justice. I loved the fact that they brought him onto the show, and look, I think every comic book writer, I'll just take the Hollywood side of my life aside for a second. Every comic book writer, when they take one of our characters and put them in another medium or make a action figure out of them, that's a special kind of thrill. It's really cool. It's obviously not the reason why it's obviously not the reason why you write comics, but it's definitely one of the perks when you get a chance to see one of your babies go on and find themselves in a different medium. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, and he was definitely a really cool character. I thought that he definitely gave the show an extra spice. Yeah,
I thought so too. I actually thought the way they wrote him was brilliant, and quite frankly, I think they did more with that character than I did. So I doff my cap to them. That's the other thing that's kind of nice when your creation lives on in a different medium, is it's really an opportunity to see someone do a better job with that character than you ever did.
So you've been the showrunner of Arrow for its whole time. And now, recently, you've stepped down, correct? You're just an executive producer now?
My title's consulting producer.
Okay, all right. So what's the difference? What's the difference of your involvement now from showrunner to what you're doing now?
I play a lot more tennis. No, I'm kidding. But I do play a lot more tennis. Basically, it truly is. I'm truly just consulting, which is, I talked about Schwartz pretty much every day, mainly because we like talking to each other, and just sort of, we'll kick around ideas, or, there'll be some sort of production problem that, I can sort of speak to because I know all the players and I was doing it for a very long time. Give notes on cuts, give notes on scripts. I'm sort of like there to help out any way Beth needs me to. But what I'm not is responsible for the day-to-day operation of the show. I'm no longer doing passes. Like I used to do a pass on every script that got shot. I'm no longer doing that. I'm not, I'm only giving advice on how to solve the problems. I'm not actually solving the problems myself or responsible for solving the problems myself. I'm not on the notes calls for the most part. I'm kind of, I'm kind of, in a sort of passive role, but I'm there for whatever Beth and the writers need.
So if you can answer it, if you don't want to answer it, that's fine. What made you want to step down from show running, being the showrunner?
I'll give you, I only had 189 reasons. And that's the total number of episodes between Arrow and DC's Legends of Tomorrow.
Right.
And that doesn't include 4 crossovers and 3 tie-in animated shows and an outline for a novel and several 2 different comic book runs for tie-in comics. So long story short, I was just burnt out. I was just ready to do something else. And also, quite frankly, I felt very strongly that, if the show was going to go on and have, a longer life past season 6, it needed some some new voices coming in.
Sure.
That it needed some new ideas. Because in many ways, I went into Arrow and I had I had a bucket list really of the things that I wanted to do with the show and with the character, and I'd pretty much done it all. So rather than dig, for scraps at the bottom of the bucket, I thought the best thing is really to step away. And the truth of the matter is, if you look at the history of network television, when you're talking about 22, 23 episode orders per season, very few showrunners stay with their shows past season 5. The one exception I can think of is Joss Whedon, who stayed on Buffy through season 7, but he also had taken a step back in season 6. And Marty Noxon ran the show in season 6. So, everyone really does step away. And at the end of season 6, I came to realize why that is.
Well, Mark, you've been amazing. We'll definitely have to have you on the show again to, there's so much more things I wanted to ask you, but we went so long, and, I don't want to take so much of your time. But if you could stay on the phone for us so we could get a drop from you.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So thank you, Mark, so much.
Thank you.
Rifters.
Thank you, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Marc Guggenheim, a great man. We're going to go on a quick break, and we'll be right back with our second pre-recorded interview, so stay tuned.